I'm thinking about this term proceeding, or proceedings with an S on the end. And I'm thinking about it in two ways. I'm thinking about it firstly in terms of it meaning kind of process, movement, walking, a journey. There's a sense in which when you talk about proceeding, you're talking about it as a, you're kind of signifying that you're making some kind of journey or making some movement. And the second meaning, which draws on the metaphor of movement, is the proceedings of a certain kind of event, particularly conferences. And I think this is where I'm going to go into talking about this idea of conferences, which I think I've talked about before. I'm just kind of revisiting it in a way. The proceedings of a conference, an academic conference, let's say, are the compiled papers, or at the very least the compiled abstracts of what was spoken about at that particular conference. They're a record of what took place, of what happened, of what was gone through, if you like. And so when we're talking about the proceedings, what happened, what was gone through, what took place, again we're kind of evoking metaphors or mobilizing metaphors to do with a certain journey through an amount of information, presumably the information that was presented at that conference. I've always found that idea of the conference quite interesting, partly because there's kind of two conferences I have in mind when I think about conferences, and they both relate to this idea of proceeding. The first is the one that I've spoken about, which is this academic conference. You go there, and when you finish, you get a copy of the proceedings. But there's a strange paradox in that, because the actual conferences itself are anything but proceeding. They're very kind of static events typically, or at least the framing of the knowledge transfer process is very static. Typically a group of people will be in a room, all sitting down, all facing towards the front, all looking at one person at the front who is also standing relatively motionless, conveying that information in a very linear, as I say, static kind of way, really. So whilst the knowledge itself has this quality of being kind of fixed and singularly located within the body of the person speaking it, sharing it, at the end of that event, when all these moments or landmarks of static knowledge have been presented, you do feel as if you've been through some sort of journey, and that journey is recorded in the proceedings. But the other kind of conference which I really like, and the other kind of sense of proceeding that I really like, is one where this particular this YouTube channel of mine, the Conference Report, gets its name from, really, which is a poem by a Persian poet called Attar. I can't remember his full name. The last part of his name is Attar. I think he was a perfumist, actually, as well as a poet. But he wrote this very long poem called The Conference of the Birds, or sometimes translated as Parliament of the Birds, but I prefer to think of it as Conference. And it's the story of the proceedings, the journey, the literal journey, of a group of birds who set out on this journey to, it's kind of to seek enlightenment, really. They go to find a king, or to find a great treasure, or to find wisdom. And the poem is the narrating of that journey. Various different birds come along for the ride. Some join the journey halfway through, some leave. They tell their stories. They talk to each other about it throughout the journey. But when they get to the end of their journey, to the location where this king, this treasure, this enlightened moment, this wisdom is supposed to wait for them, they find the place is empty. I think it's by the banks of a river. And they get to the banks of the river and there's nothing there. And it's at that point that they realise, it doesn't really work in English, but it's that point that they realise that the words in Persian for kind of king or treasure or wisdom is the same as the word for a certain number of birds. And they count themselves and they find that they have arrived there. And it's themselves and the journey they have taken and their proceedings, their literal proceedings and metaphorical proceedings that constitute the wisdom, the treasure, the king, the enlightenment. So when I'm thinking about proceedings, I'm thinking about conferences, I'm thinking about both those conferences. The one at which static knowledge transforms itself into a bound copy of the proceedings, giving a kind of map through the knowledge that's been laid out at an academic conference. But I'm also thinking about these birds, the hoopoe and the crane and the owl and all the rest, that are marching across these hills towards this riverbank in Persia.